Magnus here, and today we've got the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K test on a live shoot. Now I'm here on location to help film a coffee house kind of a excitement buzz video right before it opens. Now the thing about this is that I'm using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, or let's just call it the BMPCC 4K because it's a long name to use. But I'm going to film it using pretty much the black hammer for most of the shots. Try to work with what I've got. So I'm going to have no lights, and I'm going to basically work with all of the different modes and settings with the BMPCC 4K to get the most out of ProRes, out of RAW, and out of push this camera pretty much to get as much as I possibly can, and then give my review on what it's like not only to work with it, but to edit post and see what I can get out of the footage. Now I've got the camera on a gimbal, and that'll help smooth out the lack of in-body image stabilization, and my lens right now that I'm using doesn't have any stabilization either, so it's pretty much dependent on what I've got. So let's go on to this coffee shop shoot and see what we've got to work with. Check it out.
Behind you with like the clouds, the sky and everything, and still be able to see.
We've got the Rode video mic. Here we go.
M50. What do you guys think? Let me get this disclaimer out of the way. This is not a technical review of this camera at all. This review is just a real-world perspective on how this camera actually worked for me when it came to using it on an actual job. Let's start off this review by saying it's probably best never to vlog with this camera. Blackmagic has stated in the past that vlogging is possible and described how putting the record button in front makes it easy to vlog, as well as having good built-in microphones. But here's my opinion why you should not get this camera to vlog. No flip screen, no in-body stabilization, poor battery life, no continuous autofocus, and huge video file sizes. But hey, I shot that opening scene vlog style. You can do that with this camera, but here's what I needed. I kept the f-stop reasonable so that I can have a wide enough depth of field to stay in focus for arm's length. I had a 2TB USB Samsung T5 hard drive to record for plenty of space. I had plenty of spare batteries for the day. I used the Zihyun Crane 2 to keep the shot stabilized. And I had to use my best guess for keeping myself in the frame, thanks to no flip out screen. Now when it comes to selfie vlogs with no screen, this is not a huge deal breaker since I'm used to just standing where I need to be in front of the lens. But it is a burden. All of the other accessories are pretty much required to vlog, and it will jack up the price of this camera. Basically, spend a little more money for a DSLR or mirrorless camera that does most of these features, because if you get this camera as a cheap way into vlogging, it will cost you, and the trade-off won't be as good as a camera with a good video codec, good battery life, and a flip screen. But moving on. If you want this camera as a cheap alternative to shoot commercial work or short film and need an entry-level cinema camera, then this camera is just amazing. So let's begin by talking about my experience for the day. I recorded exclusively to the Samsung T5, which in a previous video I showed you could record uncompressed RAW at 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, I found that in this shoot it was dropping frames, so it was unusable. That's the unfortunate update to my previous video when I was able to record 60 frames per second RAW to the Samsung T5 uncompressed. I balanced the camera with my Tokina Lens on the Zihyun Crane 2. This setup took a while to balance, but after using an adaptive tripod plate, I was ready to film. Due to the frame rate issue, I recorded 60 frames per second 4K footage in ProRes HQ quality for some motion and action shots, and most of the footage was at 24 frames per second uncompressed RAW. I wanted to work with both file types just in case. The first issue of the day was battery life. The battery died so often, and unmounting it from the gimbal just to switch the battery was just a pain. If you gotta film with a gimbal a lot, I would recommend having an external battery source that can power the camera while filming. Balancing the gimbal with this camera was also a challenge with shorter lenses, but that could be because the base plate I purchased was very heavy and a small lens just threw the gimbal off. All in all, the shooting experience with this camera was amazing. The menu system and the large screen make it a true pleasure to use out on the field. I can tell you that after working with this camera for this shoot and having everything I needed, I couldn't go back to film a pro shoot with a DSLR. It was just that much of a pleasure to work with. Now, all of this would be pointless if the quality of the video wasn't good. First of all, I can tell you that I was impressed as soon as I watched the footage. The lack of compression is something I appreciate. No macro blocking or artifacts. Just large, remarkably clean files. The lighting situation was not great. However, this camera's low light capability was truly impressive, and this I was able to see when I was actually reviewing the footage. Now, speaking of the footage, let's talk about RAW versus ProRes. Both formats give you incredibly great looking footage, but let me point out the obvious. RAW footage should always be used during professional shoots. ProRes grades beautifully, and tweaking the colors works fine, but it doesn't replace the flexibility of 12-bit RAW footage. It's heavy to work with on a machine, but it's well worth it. My final opinion is this. This is a camera that's a must-buy for new cinematographers wanting to upgrade their quality of work, but just be prepared for investments in accessories to help make it more useful. If you're a vlogger, then save your money by staying away. There are much cheaper alternatives. I'm 100% satisfied with my purchase and would definitely recommend this camera because I knew what I was getting into before I purchased it. So of course, if you're considering buying this camera, do your research. Knowing what you're getting into and seeing what the workarounds would be is always best before purchasing any camera, especially this one. I put the links down below for all the items I used in this shoot. In case you're curious, please check them out. So here's a question for you. Would you buy the BMPCC 4K for vlogging? If so, why? I want to try a vlog one day with this camera and talk about my experience as well. In any case, there's a ton of features and items that I didn't discuss in this video, but I'll dedicate future videos to specific features as time continues. And as always, like, share, and you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later.